the hushed silence of the courtroom, a single, unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Mom!" Every eye in the room turned toward the source of the sound, but Claire couldn't believe her ears. Standing before her was the child she had lost 15 years ago. Ethan, the son she had thought was gone forever. The truth began to unfold before her eyes. The people standing trial weren't just criminals. They were the ones who had torn apart a family, stolen the childhoods of countless children, and now her son wasn't just a victim. He was a living testament to a journey of justice, one filled with pain and resilience. Make sure to subscribe to support us and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The sky was clear, cold, with a light drizzle falling, each drop tapping softly on the ground like the heartbeat of a lonely soul. Every time Ethan Hayes looked through the window, he felt a wave of loneliness swell inside him, as if there was no one in the world who truly belonged to him. The young boy, a person of color, unlike any other child society was familiar with, was a stranger, even within his own home. Growing up in foster homes, Ethan never felt like part of a family. Wherever he went, the probing gazes and distant gestures constantly reminded him that he would never truly belong there. The foster parents did everything they could to raise him, but there remained an invisible gap that could never be filled. They treated him as a part of the family formula, but to Ethan, he was just an unnecessary puzzle piece. The dinners were never complete. The mornings lacked the warmth of a real mother's love. Ethan tried to fit in, tried to become the child his foster family dreamed of, but those efforts always crumbled before the indifference, like a shadow that never quite took shape in the light. How many times had he tried to strike up a conversation, tried to do everything he could to prove he was a good child, but each time all it did was push the people around him further away. The looks of hesitation, the cold gestures, made his heart ache, as if invisible wounds were slowly cracking him apart. Wounds that could never be healed. He was not a part of the family, not a part of that world, and sometimes Ethan wondered if he would ever find a place he could call home. But the harshness of the world wasn't the thing that scared Ethan the most. What troubled him the most was what he saw every time he looked into the mirror. His own reflection, staring back at him with a truth he could not change. The color of his skin. It wasn't just a superficial difference. It was a long, haunting story of rejection and prejudice that he had faced since he was a child. This time, when he was sent back once again, Ethan felt that old, familiar ache rise in his chest. The new foster family had decided he didn't fit the image they wanted to build. Despite his attempts to fit in, despite his efforts to prove he was a good kid, it all turned out to be meaningless. He was sent back just like an item that had lost its value. What hurt the most was that no one could understand the feeling he carried. A child who had never received true love from the people he called family. This wasn't the first time, but this time something was different. Ethan didn't cry, didn't shout like he had in the past. He simply walked out, wiping away the tears that were on the verge of falling, trying to keep his face composed, even though his heart felt tight. He no longer expected anything. He no longer believed he would find a real family, a place he could call home. There was only one thought running through his mind: I'll never find a place to call home. As Ethan stood in the courtroom, his eyes drifted to the large wooden desk where Judge Claire Morgan sat. She was a white woman with sleek blonde hair and a sharp gaze. Although he had never met her before, he could feel the sternness radiating from her, the coldness that only someone who had faced many trials could possess. Claire was a well-known judge, respected for her fairness and decisiveness. But beneath her sharp eyes, there were prejudices she didn't even realize, wounds she still carried with her. When Ethan stood before her, he didn't speak a word, but simply said something that would haunt her for years. "You're my mom." That wasn't a statement of defiance or a demand. It was the innocent and yearning confession of a child. "You're my mom." A call to a mother, even though there was no blood connection, but a deep bond that Claire couldn't yet recognize. A chill ran down her spine. The words struck like a deep wound, digging into the doubts and biases she unknowingly carried. This boy, this child of color, was standing before her, calling her his mother, while she was just a judge handling a case. For a moment, the room fell silent. Claire paused, not because she didn't know what to do, but because Ethan's gaze, full of pain and longing, made her reconsider everything. This child didn't want anything more than to be accepted, and in that instant, she realized that even though justice had been determined, Ethan's gaze, filled with a desperate need for love, forced her to face herself. She glanced around, sensing the skepticism in her colleagues' eyes, hearing the whispers of those around her. But in that moment, Claire knew she couldn't continue avoiding the questions she had yet to answer. Inside her, a wave of conflict surged. Claire stood at a fragile crossroads, torn between her professional duties and her personal feelings. She was a judge, and everything she did had to be based on justice, regardless of skin color or background. But deep inside, she had to face an uncomfortable truth. Could she truly see Ethan as a person, or just as a child from a community that she had unknowingly held reservations about? Once again, Ethan's gaze caused her heart to falter. He needed nothing but acceptance. And if she turned him away, could she live with herself? Claire's train of thought was interrupted by a colleague's voice. "Are you sure you want to continue down this path, Judge Morgan?" But she didn't answer. The shift inside her was palpable, and she made her decision on the spot. She would not let any prejudice determine the fate of a child. Standing tall, Claire fixed her gaze firmly on Ethan. A decision had been made, and everything would change from that moment on. The light in the courtroom dimmed, and a heavy weight settled over Claire Morgan. In the days that had passed, she had felt the truth slowly unraveling. After a week of intense investigation, with the help of Detective Michael Carter, Claire realized that this case was far more than just a child trafficking ring. This network had infiltrated the highest echelons of society, with names she had never even considered. Michael, with the information he uncovered, had left Claire horrified. One of the names on the investigation list was a prominent politician, a person who had long been an advocate for children's rights. But behind his facade, he was deeply connected to the criminals running the trafficking network. It felt like a betrayal from the very people Claire had trusted. The shock hit her like a punch to the gut, forcing her to grapple with herself. Michael had found evidence that the politician had created a fraudulent program, supposedly to protect children, that funneled kids from minority communities into orphanages. Once inside these institutions, the children were turned into commodities, traded in a global criminal network. Claire could no longer contain her fury. The days of investigation had eroded her trust in the society she had once believed in. The powerful had exploited racism, public indifference, and ignorance to carry out unspeakable acts. But this discovery didn't just fill her with rage. It made her more determined than ever, not just for justice, but for the lives of the children destroyed in the process, including Ethan, her son. She couldn't shake thoughts of Ethan. His eyes, full of hope and yearning, were etched deeply in her mind. Every time she thought of him, a fierce impulse gripped her heart. Despite being abandoned, Ethan still believed in the possibility of love and acceptance. And now Claire understood that this journey was just beginning. The next day, Claire and Michael sat across from each other in a small room at the police station. The dim yellow lights created a somber atmosphere, but the air in the room felt heavier than ever before. They both knew they were stepping into dangerous territory, a dark world that those in power would do anything to keep hidden. "Claire, do you think this is just a regular kidnapping case?" Michael spoke, holding a thick file, his gaze serious. "I've dug deeper. The evidence doesn't add up." Claire glanced at the file, carefully skimming through each page. Every detail made her more uneasy. She realized something that no one had noticed before. A terrible network had formed under the surface of society, preying on children of color, children from minority communities the world was willing to forget. The cost of prejudice wasn't just the cold stares, it was lives being stolen, fates shattered in silence. "We need to go deeper," Claire said, her voice cold yet resolute. "This isn't just a kidnapping case. It's a systematic conspiracy, a well-connected web of power and criminals." Their investigation took them into the darkest corners of the city, places ordinary citizens never ventured. Information from underground sources slowly began to surface, and what they uncovered made the situation even more terrifying. The people behind this network weren't just ordinary criminals. They were powerful figures who knew how to use racial prejudice to shield their malevolent schemes. Every meeting, every secret exchange they made was fraught with danger. They began reaching out to individuals connected to the network, people who might provide crucial information. But everything had to be done carefully because Claire and Michael knew that one wrong move could cost them their lives. Finally, on a rainy night, Claire and Michael found themselves in a secret storage facility, surrounded by old files no one dared to touch. Every step they took in that room was perilous, but they knew this was their only chance to uncover the truth. And eventually, they found a crucial piece of evidence. Ethan wasn't an abandoned child. He had been kidnapped right from the hospital as a newborn, and the traffickers had used his racial difference to conceal the truth, that he was Claire's biological son. Claire stood frozen. The entire room seemed to stop. A part of her memory rushed back, the image of a baby in her arms, the strange feeling she couldn't explain at the time, the tears she hadn't understood when she first laid eyes on that boy. Now she had the answer. Ethan was her son, and she had lost him for 15 years without ever knowing. "Claire, are you okay?" Michael asked, his voice tinged with concern. She didn't answer immediately. Her mind was spinning. What had just happened? The memories, the emotions that had never been explained, now became undeniable truths, weighing heavily on her. Claire had to face an irrefutable fact. Ethan, the boy she had thought was a stranger, was her own flesh and blood, and she had missed his entire life. "We need to act now," Claire said, her voice sharp and filled with power. "Ethan's life is in our hands, but it's also the chance to bring down a crime bigger than anything we imagined." The tension escalated, and the dangers began to surface. Claire and Michael knew that the people behind this trafficking ring would stop at nothing to protect their network. The powerful figures were trying to stop the investigation, but they couldn't turn back. They couldn't let the truth remain buried. With unwavering determination, Claire and Michael began planning to expose the truth, knowing it could lead to danger but refusing to look away. Ethan wasn't just a victim. He was the key to uncovering the darkest secret society was desperately trying to conceal. In the shadows of a rainy night, Claire sat by the window, reflecting on what was ahead. Her life had been tested time and again, but this time she knew she wouldn't stop until justice was served. And this time, no one could stop her. The dim light of a gloomy morning streamed through the courtroom window, casting faint streaks across the floor. Claire Morgan sat in her judge's seat, her eyes fixed intently on the defendant standing before her. The air in the room felt heavy, taut with tension. Everyone was silent, waiting for the verdict, but no one knew that the truth had already surpassed their expectations. Everything had changed. Today wasn't just another trial. This was the confrontation with a massive criminal system, one that powerful people had spent years concealing. The individuals behind this child trafficking network weren't just ordinary criminals. They were people who had exploited racism and society's indifference to continue their dark operations. These people had stolen the lives of countless children, turning them into pawns in a web of criminal dealings. Claire could feel the tension in every passing moment. Every glance from her colleagues, every look from those in the courtroom was filled with doubt, anxiety. But her heart no longer carried fear. This journey had gone on for too long, and now it was time for justice to be served. She wasn't just a judge in this courtroom, she was the mother who had finally found her son after 15 years apart. That is what she wanted, and she knew that today's decision would not only determine the fate of the defendants, but would also send a message about the change society desperately needed to confront. Along with Detective Michael Carter and the FBI, Claire had gathered enough evidence to bring these criminals into the light. The evidence they uncovered had revealed the dark truths of a criminal conspiracy, and now it was time for the guilty to pay the price. Claire stood, her eyes sharp, filled with unwavering resolve. She knew that justice wasn't an easy path, but she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. "These people," Claire began, her voice steady, unshaken, "have stolen from these children the lives they deserved to live. They deceived the world, hiding the truth that these children were the sons and daughters of mothers they destroyed. Today, we will not let them escape." Her words echoed like a warning, silencing any remaining doubts in the courtroom. As the defendants were found guilty, Claire saw the light return to the eyes of the children she had saved. These children, no longer nameless victims, had been given a second chance at life, a chance for a new future. And in their eyes, Claire saw something she had never felt before: gratitude, hope, and a belief in justice. The court handed down the sentences. The criminals would be held accountable. But justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration and redemption. In that moment, Claire knew that her journey with Ethan had only just begun. After the trial, Claire drove home, her heart heavy but hopeful. Little did she know that a fateful meeting awaited her. When she entered her house, she found Ethan standing at the door, his eyes filled with anticipation, as if he had been standing there forever, unable to leave. "Have you been waiting for me long?" Claire asked gently, and Ethan simply nodded. That simple question stirred emotions in her that she couldn't hold back. No words were needed as the two embraced in an emotional moment. It felt as though all the distance between them had vanished, as if all the years of separation were erased, leaving only love and reunion. No words were necessary, only the silent tears falling. Tears of happiness, tears for the years of loss that had been recovered. "Mom, I knew you wouldn't abandon me," Ethan whispered, his voice choking with emotion, the words carrying all the pain he had endured. It was the faith he had held on to, no matter how difficult life had been. Claire held Ethan tighter than ever, as if trying to make up for the years they had lost. "I will never abandon you again. I found you. I love you, not because of the color of your skin, but because of you. You are my son." Those words wiped away all the pain, the hurt, and the longing in Ethan's heart. He had come home, back to the only place where he truly belonged. But this moment of reunion wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a new journey. Although the crimes had been exposed, there was still much work to be done to heal the wounds in society. Claire and Ethan couldn't let other children suffer what Ethan had endured. Together, they began organizing campaigns to raise awareness about human trafficking and racial discrimination, calling for fairness and equality for all the children who had been hurt. "We have to change this world," Claire said, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to help other families find their children and give them hope." Ethan looked at his mother, a soft smile appearing on his face. "We can do it, Mom. I believe in you." And in that moment, Claire felt as though nothing could stop her now. They would continue this journey, helping the children who had been hurt and creating a fairer society. This was the lesson Ethan had taught her, about love, hope, and the strength of unity. Together they would fight so that no child would ever endure the pain Ethan had suffered, and so everyone could find a place to call home. Hit the subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment so I can hear your thoughts and suggestions for future videos.